Welcome to problem set 1.3, the lecture on rounding numbers, estimating answers, and displaying information. I'm on page 25 of your textbook. What we're going to do is we're going to learn how to round. You've probably done this over the years, but we're going to revisit again. As far as rounding numbers is concerned, what we're doing is we're trying to make these numbers sometimes more usable, especially when you're doing some kind of mental mathematics. Numbers that end in 0 are always easier to work with than numbers that end in any other number. 5,382 wouldn't be real easy to add or subtract from other numbers in your head. So if we can round, it makes it a lot easier. So if you remember in 1.1, what we did is we learned the different place values of numbers. For instance, we talked about how this set of numbers was the units, the tens, the hundreds, and then we had the next set, which we don't have these other two numbers here, but this was the thousands, where we had 1,000s, 10,000s, 100,000s, and then we went to millions with 1 million, 10 million, 100 million. So knowing those place values is going to be really important as far as these lessons are concerned, because the book will say, given this number, round that number to the nearest hundred. Well, if you don't know where the hundreds position is, you're not going to know which number to round to. But we do know, so we know that the 3 is in the hundreds position. So I'm just going to underline that. It makes it easier for me to remember which number I'm looking at. And we'll just follow some quick, easy steps as far as knowing how to round. So we're rounding that hundreds position, that 3. So step 1 is you look to the first number to the right of that 3, or the number that you're rounding, and if that number is 5 or greater, or even in this particular one less than 5, so really these numbers over here to the right of the 3, if they're any number at all, we're going to change them to zeros. We don't care what number they are, they're going to change to 0. Everything to the right of the number we're rounding. Well, before we change those all to zeros, let's look and see what we started with. We look at the number to the right of the number we're rounding, and if that number is a 5 or greater, this 3 changes to 1 digit up. So if this number here is 5 or greater, this 3 would change to a 4. If this were a 6, it would change to a 7, etc. And all the numbers to the left just stay the same. We do nothing to them. So we look at our position here. All the numbers to the right change to zeros. All the numbers to the left stay the same. And this 3 changes to a 4, or the next digit up, if this number is 5 or greater. If this number were less than 5, let's make it a 2, everything else we would do the exact same. Everything to the left of the 3 would remain. Everything to the right of the 3 would turn into a 0. But because this is a 2, because it's less than 5, we do nothing to the 3. If it's 5 or greater, it goes up 1. If it's less than 5, it stays the same. And that would be rounding 5,322. Alright, let's try another example real quick. Not a whole lot of difficulty to this. Let's look at the example on page 26, example 3. They give us the number 973, and they're asking us to round to the nearest hundred. That being the case, I'm going to underline my 9 there, because that's in my hundreds position, and they want me to round it to the nearest hundred. What I had said before is everything to the right is going to change to a 0. This 7 here is 5 or greater. So I know that it's going to affect this 9 here. So remember, if this is 5 or greater, this number is going to go up 1. Well, what is 9 plus 1? It's 10. And you're done. That's all there is to that. So even though it's like, 9, yeah, it goes up to 10, but there's 2 digits, we don't care. Went from a 9 to a 10, and we're good to go there. So that's the idea of rounding. Let's jump into a section called estimating. Before we do that rounding, one of the important parts of rounding is you never round your numbers until after you do the math. If I am adding a bunch of numbers together and I'm trying to think and talk at the same time and have a hard time coming up with various numbers. And I'm going to add those. I do not estimate them or round prior to adding them. I always add first, and then when I get my answer, then I round it. And it'll either go up or down depending on what position I'm looking at. But you don't round first. You do the math first, and then you round. Which brings us to estimating. Estimating, on the other hand, you estimate before you add. So if I have 4,872 and 1,691 and 777 and 6,124, like the example on page number 27, what I do here is I estimate, or I round first, and then I add them up. And that's what estimating is. Rounding is add all the numbers up as is, round the answer. Estimating, you round before you add. So if I am, in this example, estimating the answer by rounding each number to the nearest thousands, well, this 4 is 1,000, this is 1,000, don't have one here, and this is in the thousands position. So that's what I'm rounding to. So let's go ahead and round that. So I've got my 4, this is an 8, it's bigger than, or it's 5 or greater, so this 8 is going to change this 4 to a 5, and then remember, you put everything else in zeros. This 1 next to it is a 6, it's 5 or greater, that changes that to a 2, followed by zeros. This here is my thousands position, there's nothing there, but I still look to the right. That number is 5 or greater, so nothing plus 1 is 1. So I've got a 1,000 there when I round that, because this is 5 or greater, this is going to change from a 0 to a 1. This here, we've got a 1 in this position, it's not 5 or greater, so this 6 is going to stay just as it is. Alright, so then I just add all of these up, my zeros all add up to zeros, and I get 14,000 then as an estimate. If I were to add these up quickly doing the math here, I would get a number similar to that, but I would get the exact answer. But if we're just trying to get an estimate, that's all an estimate is a good, solid guess, I guess, within a few digits. So, you know, this answer may be 14,430, but if I'm just going, well, if I add these up, it's going to be somewhere around 14,000. At least I have a general idea of where my answer is going to fall. So sometimes it's not really important to get an exact answer, and estimating and rounding really help. Alright, there is a bar chart on page 28. All we're doing there, I'm not going to write anything on the board, but just to glance at that real quick, just so you can read it. It says again on page 28, the table and chart below give 2 representations for the amount of caffeine in 5 different drinks, one numeric and the other visual. The numeric is in the table 2 on the left, and they're given the different drinks and how much caffeine is in each one of those drinks. So brewed coffee is 100, instant 70, tea is 50, etc. Then they have what is called a bar graph, and that's on the right. And it just gives you a better visual of your brewed coffee. You can see just instantly that there's more caffeine in brewed coffee than in any of the other ones, just because that bar is longer. So it's more of a visual, quicker way to figure out which has more of anything or less of anything, or faster or slower, whatever. So just being able to recognize what's going on there, and I'll go over a few of those in the problem set on the next video. So that's it for 1.3.